Welcome to part 13 of the mod making series for locked loot containers. In this one, I'm probably going to be doing some fairly, well, not so much complicated stuff. It's just stuff that it's a little bit more complex than what I've mostly been doing. I'd say, like, not particularly, but just stuff that I don't do that often, I guess. So to me, it seems complex, even though at the end of the day, nothing's really complex if you've done it enough times and such. I'm probably not going to be explaining like a crazy amount here. There's probably going to be a lot of cuts, as there was in the last video, because it's just sometimes it's hard to speak and make progress at the same time. So it's just like I'm just looking at it, thinking and typing, programming, whatever, doing the process in my head and stuff. And then hopefully showing the results afterward, and hopefully that helps or makes sense in some way. But I'll still be talking here and there, but maybe just not this much. So, but what I want to do in this episode, at least, the goal I want to make is basically starting the procedure to make the, even though ironically I just did the testing with the dialogue box thing and the buttons, I was like, you know what? Let's rip the band-aid off now and just start working on the stuff where it's like the player can activate the chest to try and activate the lock picking thing by being in steal mode. The player can do the inspect thing by being in info mode and close enough. And what the other one is, I don't know what grab mode's gonna do. That might be, yeah, I'm not sure what grab mode will do. Maybe that'll bring up a dialogue thing. Just so if you don't want to do the go into steal mode or go into info mode kind of deal. I don't know, but as well as maybe some of the other things where if you cast a spell on it, something, you know, if you cast a spell on it, something happens. If you cast open on it, something happens. If you try to attack it, it tries to bash it, that sort of stuff. I'm not really sure what to call it. I guess the physical kind of interaction with the chest that I wanted to do, I'm going to be trying to get that stuff sorted out. The backbone for that, I guess. And I'm going to be taking a lot of stuff from the base DFU code, as well as probably a few things from my other unfinished thing that I was working on, better random encounters and stuff, that I do something similar. But it's going to be mostly from player activate, most likely, and possibly like weapon manager, the thing that involves the player attacking and stuff. And probably looking at a lot of stuff very similar to the actual doors, the doors inside dungeons and interiors and stuff. They call them Daggerfall action doors, because they do very similar things to what I want to do, and that they react and do something based on if you attack it, if you click it, if you cast a spell at it, that kind of thing. But yeah, without much further ado, let's start up some music, and let's start, I guess. This is Bomberman 64, Sky Planet Horizon. And I just realized my mistake. I forgot to turn on my smart filter thing, so that beginning part, there's probably going to be a lot of fan noise or something, so sorry. Apologies for that, but it should be gone now. So, one of the first things before I forget I want to do is add a variable to have a value that basically knows what activation mode that the player is in, and then I will use that after the custom activation and stuff to determine certain things. So I want that as a global variable. And in this case, it'll probably be a read-only one, I guess. Hmm. I mean, possibly not, because I can just define it within the local scope of the chest activation, I believe. Because I know it's a thing. So let's just try that. Current mode. Current mode. Yeah, should be able to use this. Now, maybe I should make that a global variable. I don't know. Because I'll just have it set whenever it's called, I guess. So maybe I will try that. Let's do public. I've never really done public static game. Or whoops. That. So get, and then I don't know how it works after this. Maybe I could just do this. Or something. A get or set. I'm guessing maybe I put that after. Nope. Whoops. Get. A get or set accessor expected. I've seen so many like this, but let's see if I can find one. Probably won't be that lucky, but we'll see. Aha! Here we go. Now, no idea if that'll work like I'm expecting, but hoping it does. And I don't want to do the I don't want to have it I don't want to have it settable. I just want it to be a read-only value here. So keep it just as get. Now I should be able to use that anywhere within this class at least, and then get that value. At least that's the theory here. And we will copy and paste a switch case over here. Which we will use to determine what it does depending on the player activate mode. We got current mode. Oops, yeah. And we'll probably remove most of this stuff. But save some of it for logic's sake, so I could reuse it. Okay, so I just most likely cut out a pretty large portion of stuff just because I wasn't talking at all. I was just thinking and moving lines of text here and there, changing a few things, and doing some lines of code and such. Not mostly copy and pasting. Really not that much. But I'm going to explain what I did during that time. And hopefully that's useful. So, as I was explaining, what I did initially is that I was like, okay, I want this current mode thing to be similar to player activate, where it has these activation modes the players in, the four that there are in the game. Info, or it goes from steal, grab, info, and talk. All those four modes that you could be in. So I wanted those. So I was like, all right, let me make a global variable within my class here, just like I did with the other global variable. But in this case, I just made it a read-only thing, so there's no set, just get. And all it's doing is that whenever I call this variable, whatever you want to call it, it's almost like a method, I guess, because it's returning a value, but whenever I call this current mode within my class, within this script that's within this class right now, the game will do get, and then it will try to return this value, GameManager.instance.playerActivate.currentMode. So that should get whatever mode the player is currently in, and then give that value basically. Um, and then I was like, all right, so I'm gonna be doing that in chest activation. So whenever a chest that is registered, whenever a sprite that is registered here in this chest activation method is hit or clicked or whatever, then it will do all this stuff. Similar to, basically the exact same as what we were doing before, except in that case, it was giving a message box that you would then make a choice with. But now in this case, it's actually doing things based on what your activation mode is, not just the message box or whatever. As well as right here, it if you are too far away from the object, like outside of the default activation distance that most things use, and then it'll say you're too far away on the I guess the middle screen text or something. Just like it does everything else that you're too far away from trying to click. So, real quick, I'm going to try to give a quick explanation about what switch case things are, whatever you want to call these switch case things. So, they're very similar to like a chain of if and if else and then else statements, if statements and such, except they are much, depending on what you're doing, depending on how you're doing it, they're much more organized and I think easier to read generally than a whole, and probably more efficient processor wise potentially. Supposedly from what I read on like a while ago when I was first getting into these switch case things, is that they use up more memory, the way that they work or something like that. But for the most part, just pick whichever one is going to work best for you. In my case, a lot of the time switch cases are better because they're easier to read. They work. I do well with using them. They have some shortcomings here and there, but generally I like using them a lot. They use so many less lines generally than like a whole thing of if and else statements for this kind of thing, so they're just really handy, and I would definitely recommend reading up about them and learning how to use them if you ever do stuff like this, because they are so nice if you figure out how they kind of work. Um, but they're basically very similar to like a whole chain of if else statements, depending on how you're doing it. So like you give it a I guess like a variable kind of thing here, like a type almost. It could be anything like a number. In this case, it is this type, this player activate modes thing. And then the cases are basically if if this thing, this current mode, whatever this thing is in here where the switch is, if any of the things down here are that thing, it'll like immediately or whatever you say, it'll go to that thing that it currently is of this, and then choose whichever one that you have in these cases here. Case, like in this case, it's info and talk will do this block of code here. We'll execute this block of code. Similar if they were like an if statement, basically, like they will execute this block of code. One thing you have to note is that after a case, you have to do some way to break it or whatever. So pretty much at the end of every case block of code, you need to at least have some kind of break or some sort to tell it to go to the end, basically. Afterwards, um, but yeah, that's my very horrible explanation of switch cases. But they're I'll just tell you they're really useful if you have any inkling to do coding stuff like this. I would definitely suggest looking into them. They're very, very useful. I love using them. They're so much easier to use than a whole crap ton of if and if else statements in many cases. But besides that, what actually happens here is that so if the player is currently in info or talk mode, I was gonna make some cute little thing for talk mode, but I was like, screw it. Just if somebody's in talk mode, they're probably in it accidentally. They're probably in it accidentally if they're clicking on a chest. So it's like, all right, let's just have info and talk mode be the same thing in this case. Assume the same thing. And this will be attempt to inspect the chest. And as I said, for everything in this particular thing, if you are too far away from the default activation distance, it'll just say you're too far away. But if you are close enough, if you are info and talk mode, it will do what we did before when you did the that one button that I assigned to do inspect. So it does right now. It does the exact same thing. It just says, "Good job, you inspected the chest," and then you could close that message box. And it's the exact same deal that I did now with steal mode for now, is that it attempts to lockpick the chest right there. And it'll do all the stuff that we did before to, the lock clicks open and it opens the chest, does all that other stuff, changes the object and everything. It does the exact same stuff, just here instead of after having to click a, message box button. And then I was like, okay, so what's grab mode gonna do? I didn't want to make it lockpick again, so I was like, okay, so in this case, I will make grab mode the optional or maybe semi-optional choice of the message box that we had. So if you don't want to do it in info mode or talk mode, or if you don't want to do it in steal mode, you could just do it with grab mode, because grab mode, it will bring up that message box that we had before, a little bit trimmed down for now, because the other things like bashing and spell casting and stuff, we're going to have a completely separate way that they're going to detect that those happened. Not this custom activation thing. They have to be detected in some other way that I'll have to do later. But in this case, grab mode will bring up that message box, with a few less buttons than before. And it'll say, do you want to inspect it, basically? Do you want to attempt to pick lock it? Or cancel and then exit that box. The other thing, besides that, the other thing, also I changed the message just so it's, what do you want to do with this chest? The other thing that I will add eventually, most likely, is that this might be the cleaner way, possibly. I mean, I'll have to consider it later, but this might be the cleaner way to have the disarming traps feature being a thing that you could do. So instead of just like I I forget how it works in Morrowind. I think if you use a probe, it attempts to disarm the trap, but if you use a lockpick, it'll just set off the trap. Something like that. Um, but for right now, I'm not even worried about any kind of tools or anything, which might be a thing later, but for right now, I'm not even worried about that. So in this case, it's going to be context sensitive. So that if you haven't done anything to the chest to identify it, if you haven't inspected it, if you don't have no idea what the chest actually is, besides, yeah, if you had no idea what the chest really is, you just immediately try to pick lock it, then you're potentially going to put whatever, activate the trap. But if you try to inspect it first, then it'll give you as I said, it's going to give you much more information, potentially, if your skill is high enough and your attributes or whatever related attributes are high enough to inspect it properly and get proper information about it. And if you do inspect it, and there is traps, and you do successfully actually detect those traps, then when you do grab mode again, or when you do grab mode after inspecting it, another button will likely be added here, which in that case will be for disarming or attempt to disarm the trap instead of yeah, attempt to disarm the trap or a trap, whatever of the multiple that might be in there or something. So that's the idea I have now with that, at least. So yeah, that's what I've gotten so far in this little section, and I'll have to see how much time passed on the recording, but it was probably about 20 minutes, 30 minutes maybe that I was doing that. It wasn't like that much. I was just thinking a lot. What I probably should do is I should probably test this right away. Um, but I'm, you know, oh yeah, also with I didn't change anything down here for the actual buttons. Uh, so this stuff is the same. It should do the exact same stuff. There's just less buttons, so there won't be the one for bash yet, or for the pick lock with the open spell, whatever. That, like I said, that'll be used in a different way later. Done in a different way. But I don't feel like testing it right now, and I have fairly decent confidence that it should work this way, even though I will test it like later, obviously, but right now I don't feel like launching the Unity editor, so I just feel like doing more code. So I'm going to save what I've done so far. And the next thing I'm going to do is try to do more reading and see how I might hopefully be able to do stuff like detecting bashing and detecting magic potentially. So yeah, I'm probably likely going to have to add an update method to detect it each frame kind of deal, but I'll have to see how Weapon Manager deals with the doors, as well as for the open spell stuff. So I'm gonna have to do more reading, so I will likely cut and then be back whenever I do that, and then I'll start continuing coding some stuff if I feel like it, so I'll probably be right back. Alright, so I'm back after I don't even know, probably at least like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours of just like reading through some of the code, weapon manager, um and some other stuff, FPS weapon and such, to kind of get an idea how to replicate the behavior I want through an update, um, through the use of an update method like this. And after a lot of messing around, as well as reading, and a lot of daydreaming, I was able to finally get something that seems to make sense, at least hopefully in the end. Thankfully, once again, Dunny of Penwick from the Penwick Papers mod being pretty helpful with his code that gave me some good ideas. I was like, oh, okay. At least the main one here was the stuff about him using the dirty tricks thing, where I guess you could like kick people in the face or kick enemies in the face or something like that. And he had the example of manager.screenweapon.attacking, which I was kind of confused at how I'd be doing that. Um, and this way, at least if it works, seems much better where he's actually using a I don't know what you call this, a thing I wasn't aware of, the game manager.instance.weapon manager. And then you could call screen weapon so you know what weapon is currently being used on the screen to attack. Um, and then you could check is attacking or not. So after I saw that, and then I looked through some of the stuff in under update in Weapon Manager itself, I kind of came up with the thing that was like, okay, so maybe this is a not too inefficient process-wise for what I'm trying to do here. So I just put update in our main code here. I also put this up here, new global variable, the weapon manager. It's just there to save. Yeah, I could really just put this before the anytime I call it as well, it would do the same thing. So it's not a big deal. But then I put the actual update method, the Unity update method that model behavior classes have. I put that here, and I wrote down that I'll obviously have to refine it and such for better detection and stuff like that. But the first thing I have is just a check. So if game manager dot is paused, is game paused is true, then to return or basically stop the execution there. Because remember, this update is happening every single frame in game, so it's happening very often. So certain things, it's like, I mean, I don't know if this is more efficient than not having it, but because maybe it's causing more processing, just checking that every time instead of just going to the next one. But I'm not sure. So for me, right now, I just have it. Is game paused? I usually will say, yeah, like return. You would not want to do that if you're doing something like it's something that you have an update checking in the menus, because that's usually considered the game is paused, so you would not want that. But in my case, I only care because if the game is paused, then I don't expect you to be interacting with chests or stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, I'll just do that, even if it's less efficient for now, because I don't know. It seems like it might make sense, but yeah. And then the next check after that is if Weapon Manager, which is the weapon manager thing that I showed up there, essentially just a reference to that. If weapon manager dot screen weapon, which is essentially whatever weapon you have out on your whichever weapon you have out equipped and currently on your HUD display, essentially which weapon you're using currently. And the weapon manager like keeps track of that. And then weapon manager dot screen weapon dot is attacking, and you're basically checking with that, is the weapon in a current state or frame that it is trying to attack which essentially means is it in any other frame that is not idle? But if it is an idle, then it is not attacking. If it is anything else than idle, then it is considered attacking. So in this case, if it returns false for that, so if the weapon is not attacking, like it's in idle state, then return and end the execution here. Because I don't care when the weapon is in idle. I care when the weapon is currently attacking. And then after that was something that I was like, oh, wow. So that's how it does it. And that is just... I didn't know that... I found this in the update somewhere for Weapon Manager, down in that big update method. Big, like, pretty long method itself. But further down, when it's actually getting to the interesting stuff where the attack is being kind of like registered or considered, it was something like this, is that weaponmanager.screenweapon.getCurrentFrame. So this, I guess, gets the frame that the weapon is, the weapon's attack frame that it's currently in, or just the weapon's frame that it's currently in. So if that equals the weaponmanager.screenweapon.getHitFrame, then it will continue the execution here where I have. Because getCurrentFrame, like I said, is looking for whatever frame that the weapon is currently using, or whatever, like on the screen, whatever frame it is, animation frame. And getHitFrame is, at least for bows, it's 5. That's apparently the hit frame for the bow, is when it's actually like shooting the arrow is frame 5. And for everything else, it's 2. So for every other melee weapon, it is frame 2 that is considered where the hit actually gets registered, essentially. Like every other frame is just there, and it's not doing anything. But when you get to frame 2, that is actually when a ray will be shot out, and it'll check if it hits something, basically, like either it be an enemy or a wall or a door or whatever. So that's what we want, is we want to check only when that frame is currently happening, that being frame 2 for any melee weapon. And then in that case, we execute whatever's down here. And in this case, I'm checking again or I'm checking something else, weapon manager.screenweapon.weapon-type. And we're checking if it is equal to bow. And if it is equal to bow, then stop execution here. If it's anything else but a bow, then continue. We want this because we don't want it to try to bash if you just shoot your bow while you're close to the chest. We want it to only check for the bows later on, which we're going to have to do later on, for the actual projectile of the arrow, not the bow itself. You're not hit, at least I don't think that'd be kind of stupid to me, is that you're hitting the chest with your bow. That sounds a little bit dumb, but I mean, maybe, but yeah, that's not what I wanted. So excluded that, and then everything else will continue execution here. I would continue doing this, the rest of this part, but it's pretty late. I want to do the Let's Play, for Daggerfall video for tomorrow, and it's already pretty late, so I want to stop here while I'm at it, and I think it's a pretty good stopping point. I have a good framework for tomorrow when I want to continue doing this, where I will actually do the stuff that is similar to checking for when a door was hit, but in this case we're going to check. We're going to put out a ray, which is not the most efficient thing, but I think it's probably our best option right now, because we can't make a custom like checking for some custom object being hit, unlike the action custom activation thing. So basically the best thing I can think of is just just replicating the same behavior that currently works for that. But so just shoot our own ray and then check it from that basically for our own custom behavior. Um, but that yeah, but then with that check for if that ray hits our custom chest object, and then do whatever we want to after that. But so far this looks a lot less complicated than I was thinking it was going to be, thankfully. Um, I mean, I hope it works in the end. I haven't done any testing for it, obviously, but it seems like it should work. So we'll just have to see tomorrow, I guess. But yeah, for tonight, I am done with the coding. But once again, as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.